So good afternoon. Happy Friday. It's a bright and very sunny Friday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We trust our Tempo Talks session today will have a really wonderful start to your weekend. So thank you again for joining us. And to our many guests with us today. We have so many registered. Thank you for joining us. I am President and CEO of Tempo, Jen Dirks. Hello to all of our Tempo members and our emerging women leaders. Wonderful to have you with us on today's Tempo Talk session. We are thrilled. I'm thrilled to welcome Senior Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Kohls, Jill Timm, and today's session on leading with decisive action. I will turn it over to Jill and our moderator in just a moment, but first a few comments for today. If you are joining us for the first time as a guest or a Tempo member or a new emerging women leader, a little bit about our Tempo Talk sessions. So we started these sessions way back when, in April of 2020, when the country found itself in a pandemic, and we as a membership organization knew that we needed to continue to keep our members engaged and providing programming content and professional development opportunities to them. So we started these sessions way back in April, weekly, and the value of these Tempo Talk sessions was the opportunity to showcase our Tempo Milwaukee members on a variety of different topics. We will continue to feature these virtual Tempo Talks sessions from now until the existence and the evolution of Tempo. And we are starting a little bit of a different cadence beginning next month. The first or second Friday will feature our Tempo Talks, again, showcasing our Tempo members from noon until 1 p.m., again, from a variety of industries. So we hope you will continue to join us for these sessions. Just a couple of housekeeping items. All of our attendees have been muted. Your videos are off as well, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. So please use the Q&A or the chat function. A lot of great content will be delivered to us today from Jill Timm. And if you have any questions for her, we encourage you to use that chat, and we will have about 15 minutes at the end of today's session to answer all of your questions. Our Tempo Talks sessions would not be possible without the support of our sponsor, BMO Harris Bank. They have supported all of our Tempo Talks sessions since April of 2020, and we couldn't be more pleased. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth Cottrell from BMO Wealth Management to say a few words. Mary Beth.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, friends. It's great to be together today on this cold but sunny day. BMO is very proud to sponsor Tempo Talks, especially with our topic today of leading with decisive action. My role at BMO is private wealth advisor and director, but I also get to be the pleasure of being Tempo's immediate past chair. So I wanted to take a moment to also get to recognize the work of our great programming committee that brought this program together, and the Tempo A team. Tempo is very fortunate to be an organization of women leaders and have the opportunity to learn from women leaders like our speakers today, Jill and Penelope. I can't wait to hear what they have to share. So glad you're here to share it with me and take the time to continue to learn. Stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
Thank you, Mary Beth, and thank you, BMO, for your support of our Tempo Talks sessions. We could not be putting these on without you. And again, I echo Mary Beth's sentiments that thank you to our Tempo Programming Committee for bringing us today's content. So let's move on to today's content. It's an interesting fact, and as I shared with Jill and Penelope, if you all want to get your cameras turned on, I can turn it over to you shortly, but this is the highest number of registrations for our Tempo Talks sessions since we launched them. So it is no question that today's interview with Kohls CFO Jill Timm is something that we are all looking forward to. Leading today's session with Jill is Tempo member Penelope Smiley. Penelope serves as Director Brand Positioning for Kohls. She joined the organization in 2015 and oversees marketing campaigns, customer segment alignment, and strategic marketing initiatives from brand launches to key partnerships. Please join me in welcoming Penelope Smiley and Jill Timm. Ladies, I'm going to turn it over to you. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Jen. Okay, I think our screens are up, so here we are. All right, so I'm Penelope Smiley, and I am beyond thrilled and honored to bring Jill Timm, our Chief Financial Officer, to the Tempo community today. A little bit of background before we jump into the Q&A session with Jill is that Jill joined Kohls in 1999, so she's been with us for a number of years, and she's held a number of progressive leadership roles across finance, and most recently, she served as our Executive Vice President of Finance. But of course, prior to coming to Kohls, Jill also served as a Senior Auditor at Arthur Andersen, and collectively, she's had more than 20 years of experience in our retail industry. Today, as our Chief Financial Officer, Jill is responsible for our financial planning and analysis, our investor relations, our financial reporting, our accounting operations, tax, and treasury. And exciting for me to share that while Jill and our Kohls CEO, Michelle Goss, are part of the 1% of Fortune 500 companies that have a female CEO and CFO combination. She's a longtime resident of Milwaukee and a proud mom of 2 teenage daughters, and she absolutely has a passion for developing and mentoring teams. And so with that, we'll jump right into the conversation. So welcome, Jill. It's nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Penelope. I'm really excited to join you today.
Great. So we'll start off talking about your transition into the CFO role. So this was in the last couple of years that you've really stepped into the role of CFO at Kohls after having a long career with us. And now you're leading not only a team of finance associates, but it really puts you into a highly visible role of leadership for over 100,000 associates at Kohls. So as you think about shifting into that C-suite role that you now have, I'd love to understand from you, has your leadership style changed? And as you think about the path that brought you here, would you give yourself any coaching that might have changed your path, or how do you kind of just think about that in general?
Sure. So November actually marked my first year anniversary as CFO. So you can imagine year one was a little different than I envisioned. I did not realize we'd be navigating the pandemic. So it was a quick introduction to the CFO role and having to make decisions. What I would say the big difference is you went from really trying to influence a lot of decisions to moving to the other side of the table and having to make those decisions. And that became incredibly important as the pandemic unfolded. So you were making decisions quickly, and you had to make decisions without all the information you were used to, especially from a financial person who likes data. You know, for me, I also am very engaged with the team. And when I moved roles, I actually moved locations. And so I had to find more purposeful moments of engagement with my team. And that became even more imperative when we went to work from home and everything was virtual. So that was a big change as well. And I think the advice I'd give you is kind of what gets you here won't get you there. And it was one of those things where I had to lead with much more vulnerability than I was used to. I was very used to being the expert in the space. I knew everything about finance. As you alluded to, I've been at Kohls for 20 years. I have a deep history. And when you move to this new role, you really are vulnerable because you don't know everything. And that's a hard adjustment. You have to really believe in the teams and make strong collective decisions. And I'm just really honored to be part of an amazing team. And that's what really made this year a great year for me.
That's great. As I mentioned earlier, you're part of the 1% club of being a female CEO, CFO combination within Fortune 500 companies. It's a pretty staggering number and a pretty spectacular role to see as an associate of Kohls, to see you and Michelle step into that. I'm curious, as part of that, knowing your 1% combination, what impact, if any, do you think it has on the company of Kohls and the associates that you're leading?
So first, I feel incredibly lucky to work with such an amazing partner like Michelle. She's an incredible leader. So it definitely puts us in a unique position. At Kohls, about 70% of our customers and 70% of our associates are actually women. So I do think it puts us in a great position to really relate better to them. But from a bigger picture, I don't actually think gender matters. Simply put, you just need to lead a company effectively. So, we support a culture of innovation. We support empowering our teams to drive decisions and actions. I think the big thing is we have to make it known it's okay to fail. And that might be a big pivot for Kohls. I think we always worked in the lens of perfection. And with Michelle coming in, really introducing the fail fast, learn, make progress from those decisions. And that's been a big change to our culture. And I really think has opened up the innovation that you see. Last, I think you have to be incredibly transparent with your teams, especially during times that we're in today. Communication is key. I think you have to be very open with the challenges that we're up against, but also show that we have optimism for the future. The last I'd leave you with is I do think, unfortunately, women have higher hurdles to clear, even though it shouldn't be there. But I truly believe women always rise to the occasion. And at the end of the day, we should all be measured based on our results. So my goal as a leader is always just to leave things better than they were when I first came.
That's great. So I think it's a great conversation to pivot into. You mentioned the past year, and it's really being not a normal year. I think we all can agree with that wholeheartedly. So as we think about COVID and the implications and the impact it's had on not only us personally, but professionally, of course, it's been full of challenges. And I'd love to understand from you as you think back and how leadership at Kohls and yourself really came together to make these decisive actions, because there certainly have been a lot of them that you've had to do. I'd love for you to just walk us through that a little bit and talk to us about how we're coming out of this challenging time.
Sure. First, we came up with 2 priorities. The first priority was really the health and safety of our customers and associates. And the second was financial stability. We did have to make an incredible amount of decisions, and they were really difficult decisions like closing stores and furloughing associates. So they had a large impact, not only to our business, but to the associates' lives as well. There was no precedence for this, so you couldn't go back and look at how did people do it in the past. It wasn't even using mentors over the time that you've developed, because no one had really been in this situation. So it was really trusting your gut, leveraging the leadership team to make sure that we were moving forward, but also being willing to adjust as data became available. So never knowing exactly what the next day was going to bring, you just had to really leverage the people around you and your experience and hope you were doing the right things. And I feel like one of the things we did here well was, as a CFO, I always focused on profit. We forecasted, we talked about profit. And when we had to make the decision to close stores, we pivoted immediately to forecasting cash. So it was a whole different way of looking at things, and the team rose to the occasion. We asked a lot of people across the organization to make really hard decisions, elevate their responsibility, and change how they worked completely. And I couldn't be more proud of how the organization responded.
Yeah, I think the idea of really trusting your gut never became more prevalent and apparent as it did this last year. And it's amazing how we even continue to use that. So as you think about staying within that kind of idea of the lessons we learned over the last year in 2020, I'd love to understand on a personal level, kind of what lessons have you really taken away, and how will that maybe impact your perspective as we start a new year of 2021 and going forward?
Sure. First, I was humbled by the resilience of this organization. We took on tremendous workload, like I mentioned. We made people work differently, and we made them work from home. And so that just added a whole nother level of complexity, and not one that I would have imagined us ever doing. Even doing this virtually, we didn't do this. It wasn't our culture. Our culture was really one to be here and be present. So it was a large change. I think the big thing is we empowered our teams to make decisions. We did not have time to ask for permission. And I think that's going to be a great skill that continues to persist through our organization. It's been, the empowerment has made teams feel better. We've made incredible progress. We launched a drive-up service in 2 weeks. We asked the team to go do it. And they didn't come and ask 1,000 questions. They just did it. And, it's been incredibly well received by the customer. So it just shows how when you give teams more responsibility, they can rise to that occasion. I think what we accomplished over the last year is just incredible. We went from closing our stores to welcoming our associates back to actually signing the biggest deal in the company's history with Sephora. So it just reinforces, I think, how if you're courageous and willing to be innovative and bold in your thinking, what you can accomplish, even during some of the darkest of times.
Absolutely. You mentioned the remote working. So obviously I'm at home right now, you're at the corporate office. And just like our Tempo community, there's a lot of people that are doing that blended approach in the companies. We of course have our stores and our distribution centers, which have people in the buildings and working with people all the time. We've implemented a ton of health and safety measures to make sure they're safe and customers and anybody that walks through the doors are safe. But I think one of the most common questions I'm hearing, and I'm sure you hear it a lot, is as we move forward and we hopefully start to come out of this pandemic, what are your thoughts on the plans for returning to work? How do you feel about it? What's kind of the vision that you might have today for it?
Sure. Well, if I step back, I'll tell you, I was kind of a doubter about work from home, as people knew. Like, I really like presence. I like people. I actually was hoping we'd be doing this in person when we decided to have this meeting, but I will say COVID proved me wrong. I mean, the transition home was seamless. People did an amazing job. I keep hearing from teams how much more efficient they think they are. You know, our first quarter close happened at the end of April, so less than a month of this transition. And the feedback from our teams was just, it was so efficient. This is how I always wanted to work, because you weren't distracted. People were accessible to me. I could get questions answered more real time. So I do think as we move forward, there'll be a balance. I also think some people want to come back. I mean, there is a fatigue happening. It's harder to shut down your life and have that separation of working at home versus working in the office. There's always one more thing you can do because you're there and your computer's always on. So I think we need to address that. And then we're going to have a balance. There are going to be people who want to come in, people who want to stay home, and someone who's going to want a hybrid associate. So I think flexibility and balance is how we're probably going to see this moving forward. So offices are definitely going to look very different in the future, but I don't think it's going to be as empty as it is today, because it is kind of lonely coming into the office. But personally, for me, having 2 teenage daughters, like you mentioned, having that separation while they're homeschooling makes a lot more sense. So.
Absolutely. The handful of times I've been in the office, it's definitely a different environment, but getting back in the office, it's energizing at times for sure. So we're going to pivot conversation a little bit here and really talk about looking ahead even more past the pandemic and kind of the things that we've done strategically and key initiatives that you've had a big hand in pulling together. So as we think about going forward, one of the things we announced this past year is a new strategic vision for Kohls. And so we shared a new framework and the vision really to become the most trusted retailer for the active and casual lifestyle. And I'd love to understand from you in your own words, what that means for Kohls. Like how do you see that coming to life?
Well, first, I'm just so excited we finally got to share our strategic vision. We actually had planned to do a big investor day in New York to unveil our strategy on March 17th. So if you think of that timing, instead of being in New York, we were here deciding to shut our stores, which shut 2 days later. So it was a big change. We luckily navigated through the pandemic, and we were able to share this strategy with the investment community in October, which was really exciting. You know, we had always been working on active and always had a vision around families. And I think it's really what is unique to Kohls that helps differentiate us is that we serve the full family. And Michelle's vision, she brought in active, she brought in Under Armour, and we just continue to elevate the offerings. We continue to serve what the customer is looking for through national brands. And now we'll be adding an athleisure private brand as well to that portfolio. So you know, we continue to listen to the customer, and I think this is the way of the world. I think working from home, it defined a whole new level of casualization on how people are dressing. And so just really moving with what the customer is looking for. But the strategy is really set in the foundation of Kohls assets. You know, it functions on the fact that we have 65 million customers. We have a industry leading loyalty program through Kohls Cash, our rewards program, and our credit card. It continues to take advantage of our store base, which is incredibly healthy and has an amazing experience, as well as the continued growth engine of digital. So it plays to our strength and really just heightens those. And then it also talks about things that we're editing out, which hasn't been something in the past we've been willing to talk about. And we're editing out a lot of brands to really stand for what our customer has voted for. So the strategy has been incredibly well received. We started delivering on that with our Q3 results, obviously Sephora partnership to elevate our beauty. And the results have been amazing. The streets loved it. And since we've introduced it, so today our stock's up 120%. So I'll definitely take that as a success.
Yeah, that's always a nice sign. You mentioned the stores, and you also mentioned digital transformation. You know, Kohls as a company, we have over 1,100 stores across the country. And we know retail as an industry and the number of stores that are just out there has been evolving at a very fast pace. So as we think about the stores and through the pandemic, consumers have wanted to come into the stores. They've wanted to shop. How have the stores changed this year, and what role do you see the stores having as we go forward?
So for us, our store base is incredibly healthy. It actually really differentiates us from a lot of the retailers that you're hearing that are closing stores and actually have gone into bankruptcy. So that puts us in an enviable position. We're off mall. We're within 15 miles of 80% of the US population, which gives us a high level of convenience. And over 90% of our stores actually generate more than $1 million of cash. So we are going to continue to leverage that asset. But I would say stores are changing much more to omni-channel. The stores actually fulfilled almost 40% of our digital orders this year. We have pickup in store, we have drive up. So the customer definitely wants a heightened level of convenience. They want newness. So as they walk in the store, they want to see new brands. They want to have much more an experiential experience. And we've done that through our mannequins, our outfit bar. We launched Curated by Kohls. So it really enhances the discovery element of what the customer is looking for. And then also we've added services such as Amazon returns, so that's another level of convenience, which allows us to serve a new customer and gives us an opportunity to convert them into a Kohls customer. I think the other thing that our stores bring is we have these amazing associates. It's unbelievable how they feel so much like a family. I had the privilege to go out and visit some stores this year, and I happened to be in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And an associate told me that even when the stores were closed, the associates would get together once a week and have lunch, socially distanced, in the parking lot because they just see themselves as such a family. And that's really, I think, what helps differentiate Kohls.
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular. You mentioned this earlier, and it's one of the most exciting things I think that we're doing at Kohls. And it's about Sephora. So we've recently announced a new partnership with Sephora. We're bringing in at least 850 Sephora stores within our Kohls stores by 2023, which is very aggressive and exciting. I'd love to hear from you about the partnership. So what prompted it? What do you think people can expect? Talk about the innovation of just the partnership and how it's going to move Kohls forward.
So this is the biggest thing. It's a game changer for Kohls. We have been trying to serve our customer with beauty for many years. For the 20 years I've been here, we've probably tried, multiple different stops and starts, but we are now partnered with the global leader in beauty. So I'm really excited. Our customers said they want it, and we're delivering. We're going to have 2,500 square feet in our store as a Sephora shop. You are going to know it's Sephora at Kohls. It's going to feel like a Sephora. It's going to look like a Sephora. The associates will be trained by Sephora, so it'll be a much more high-touch environment than what you're typically used to at Kohls. And what that brings for us is traffic, which is always what you're looking for. But we don't have a lot of overlap. Sephora is typically in the mall, so there's not real estate overlap. Quite honestly, our customer overlap is low, so there's a huge amount of opportunity for both of us to grow. They're going to bring us great brands. We're going to give them great distribution. And then the halo effect of introducing those new customers, not only to the beauty side of the business, but moving over to the women's CAD and shopping for their kids and home is the ideal component. So I couldn't be more thrilled with this partnership. And it's one of the things that we talk about the highs and lows of this year. This was definitely a high. It was, in the works for some time. So as we were navigating the pandemic, we had this carrot at the end saying, hey, how do we get this new partnership announced? So really excited. It will launch in fall of 2021 in 200 doors. And then, as you mentioned, a really rapid rollout. So just another, I think, example of how we were able to innovate through this time frame and really elevate the role of our stores, which we just spoke to, is a great asset for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about partnerships, you know, a few years ago, Kohls started a partnership with probably one of the most unexpected partnerships that could happen between Amazon and Kohls. And so when we did that and we started to launch Amazon Returns, which of course is when people can bring in their Amazon products to our stores, we'll ship it up, we'll pack it back to them for free. It's been a game changer as well, I think, right? And certainly a lot of buzz out there about it. What can you tell us about that partnership and how it's going so far?
So Amazon definitely was a game changer for us as well. People were questioning it. So when we announced Amazon, I talked to a lot of investors. Some thought we were crazy, some thought we were brilliant. What I can say is we have a great culture of test and learns. We did actually test this for over a year to ensure that we were driving new customers and traffic into our stores. And they got the benefit of leveraging us from a convenience perspective. So it really showed how you could be bold in your thinking, break through the traditional department stores, and bring together this huge digital-only platform who has an extensive reach with our brick and mortar platform for a level of convenience. So, you know, you come in, you make an easy return, we give you a coupon, we convert you into a customer. What we've seen is it's driven traffic, it's driven sales. We're seeing a younger female customer come in, and I'll guarantee to you it is definitely positive to the bottom line, or we wouldn't have done it. So we're really thrilled with it. I think more is just how do we continue to evolve the partnership with Amazon? They're growing, so we keep innovating with them. You know, we have a couple stores in California that we gave some space to so they could launch Amazon Go. Can we work with them differently and really innovate together within the store, which I think is really exciting. So not just about the first, but the first of many.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm going to throw you for a little bit of a loop on a question here. Just we've been talking so much about innovation, right? And as we think about leadership and such a large organization, innovation can be a little scary to some people sometimes because it's rapid change. How do you kind of think about your role in really bringing the company through innovation and leading that piece of it?
I think first it is, we talked about empowering people. And so when they feel empowered to bring new ideas to the table and not being afraid to fail. And I think those two things, we're going to empower you, but if you fail, it's okay. Fail fast, tell us what you learned and move forward. And there's been plenty of things that haven't worked for us. We don't always publicize them, but for those of you in Milwaukee, we did try coffee shops in some of our local stores. It didn't work, so we shut it down. You know, we've launched brands that we thought would resonate. They didn't, so we shut it down. I think the thing is you have to be just really open to trying. We do a ton of testing. So it's not as though we're going to commit the whole chain to something. And so it's test, innovate, and if it doesn't work, be willing to move forward. And I think that's the spirit that we've tried to really empower the organization with. So some ideas never make it past, you know, the boardroom, and other ideas, you know, we continue to engage and invest in, and some obviously launch to all stores at the end of the day. So I feel like that's really what we have to continue to do. And more so than ever, I think people feel empowered to do that because we've done a lot during the last year alone.
Yeah, I think that's great. I can definitely feel the momentum behind it and the welcomeness from yourself and other leaders within the organization. So it's exciting. So we'll switch gears a little bit again here and really talk about career and development now. And so I know you have a lot of passion about mentoring and bringing people up. And we'll talk about Milwaukee and our role within Milwaukee a little bit, because I know you have a lot of passion there too. So Kohls is one of the biggest employers in the Milwaukee area and even the state of Wisconsin. We are one of the largest employers, and that's a big responsibility. So as you think about the workforce at Kohls and within our communities and the evolution of retail in general, what do you see as our biggest opportunity for recruiting professionals to our hometown and to the community around us?
I think first, Milwaukee has an incredible amount of talent, and we do a ton of hiring. We have a great intern program, so we leverage the great universities, you know, in Wisconsin and local to Milwaukee to really get that. I think the big thing is sometimes people think they need to know retail. I mean, also the only thing I knew about retail when I came here is I like to shop, and I'm not really sure that was a skill that they valued, but I don't need you to be an expert in retail. And I feel like that is where we need to have people feel good. I like sports. I like in a lot of things to sports. So I say, if I can hire an athlete I can teach you any sport. So if you're smart and inquisitive, and for me, have some financial acumen, I can teach you retail. And I think that goes across all of the landscapes. If you go to Kohls, we love to move people amongst departments. So there are finance people that actually end up in HR. There are IT people who end up in finance. So we try to move people around as long as you have the right skill set to do so. So I feel like that sometimes becomes a barrier because they feel like they need to be in a certain industry, and you really don't. You just really need to have the athleticism and willingness to learn and ask questions and be, inquisitive and curious to be able to do something like that.
That's great. Another kind of very relevant and current conversation at Kohls within the Tempo community and outside, probably everywhere would be my guess, is around diversity and inclusion. So as we think about that, Kohls has recently announced and shared publicly a lot about our diversity and inclusion strategy and vision. Can you talk to us a little bit about the steps that you and the leadership team are really taking to ensure that we have that diverse workforce and an inclusive environment at Kohls?
Yeah, I believe when you have a diverse workforce, you get diverse perspectives, and that just lends to more success. It lets you look at new ideas with a different lens, and that's a great outcome. The new strategy we spoke to really accelerated our commitment to diversity and inclusion. We embedded that throughout all of our business decisions, and we're now holding ourselves accountable with really measurable goals and results. And that hasn't been something we've done in the past, so I think that's a huge step in the right direction. Second, you mentioned it. We actually went public with our strategy, and we focused on people, customers, and communities. And we did put a pledge for progress out there. So we've been much more public with our commitment, and we've been much more, I think, focused on it internally, from Michelle, who is actually chairing our diversity and inclusion task force, all the way through the leadership teams. And now we're putting it through, how do we recruit to be more diverse so we can get those new ideas? How do we supply our diversity so we can have a bigger opening to product, et cetera? So I think this year is a year of change, and one of the big changes is our commitment to diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. One of the things that Kohls has always had embedded in its DNA is the volunteering and our commitment to the communities that we're part of. We're extremely engaged in the Milwaukee community, from supporting different nonprofit organizations, our volunteering program, hometown partnerships, and the list kind of goes on and on. Obviously, these are really important to Kohls, but I'd love to understand from you kind of the impact that you think that has at Kohls and what the different efforts really mean to us, and kind of how you see our continued effort within Milwaukee really evolving.
Yeah, throughout history, like you mentioned, Kohls has made a strong commitment to the community. We've actually donated over $130 million to the greater Milwaukee area. And I've been here for a really long time, and the benefits, it brings your teams together. It's so meaningful on when we go out and do our volunteer events. So we have our hometown partners that obviously we try to be as much engagement, whether it's on boards or making financial commitments. But really, my favorite is when we do our volunteer events. We've done it as full departments, we've done it as small groups, but it really brings people together from a team building and a give back. And the feedback you get when your team participates in some of these items or these events is just overwhelming. So they love it, and we're able to give back through that, which is amazing. These organizations that we support give much needed support across through. They introduce new art and culture, they introduce health and social services that are needed. They build economic empowerment and neighborhood development. So the give back and be able to see that locally is it's something that we talk a lot about. You see people in their t-shirts proudly wearing their volunteer events. It's just really part of Kohls' DNA, and I'm just really proud to be part of it.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And it's certainly in the pandemic, it's been more challenging to do the volunteering, right? But I've been super impressed just with the different ways we've still maintained that as a core value. And I'm sure I speak for many when we're really excited to get back to being able to do it full-heartedly again. So my last question for you before I hand it over to Bridget to kind of open up for some Q&A for you is really around kind of the role of being a working mom. And so I know you have so much pride in your daughters, just from talking with you. But being as a mother of 2 teenage daughters and a career-driven woman, what advice do you have for other female executives and working moms as they're aspiring to develop into leadership roles at their companies and continue to grow within their careers? And anybody that may be facing kind of different hurdles on their career journey?
So I have 2 teenage daughters. Megan is a senior at Menominee Falls High School, and then my daughter Allie is a freshman at DSHA. So talk about a time of 15 and 17-year-old in a pandemic. It's been challenging. I'm ready for college. No, I'm just kidding. They're great girls. I would say my advice as a working mom is know that it takes a village. You cannot do everything yourself. You know, I had great friends and family. They got my kids on the bus for me. They helped me make sure that they could get to after school activities, because I always wanted them to ensure that they could have access to anything they wanted, and it wasn't limited because of my decision to be a working mom. So that would be one piece of advice. Know that I was never the room mom, but I did always make sure my kids knew they were my priority. So they knew I would go and chaperone one field trip in grade school. It happened to be the tour of the state capitol. So I went with Megan. It was great. And then by the time Allie's turn came, and she was waiting for this because she knew this was the field trip I was going to be chaperoning, they changed the timing. And they changed the timing to overlap with our quarter close. So I was on a school bus headed to Madison on the phone, still trying to ensure our books could get closed, but she knew she was my priority. I committed this to her, and I fulfilled that commitment. And I think Kohls is great about the balance of work and family, and there was no pushback for me to do that, and I made it work. And I think that's one thing that they've always liked. When I actually got promoted to CFO, I mean, no one could have been more proud than my 2 daughters. I actually made their story on Snapchat. I think that's a huge accomplishment. And even during the pandemic, I'll share this with you, like they leave me little notes in my purse because they knew it was a stressful time and they just wanted to be there for me. So it's been really an amazing journey watching them develop, and how my choices and being in this role has helped them as well to be really strong girls. My second piece of advice is really have a mentor. I have been blessed with great mentors throughout my career. And my one story is I had a mentor, and he only worked at Kohls a short period of time, really less than 2 years, and he moved on, but we've stayed close. But in that 2 years, he recognized something in me. I had always worked in really the financial reporting side of finance. You mentioned I started at Arthur Andersen. It was just a skill. There was rules, there was regulations, it was black and white. And he challenged me to go over and run our planning and analysis group, which is not black and white. It's much more analytical. You have to work in gray. And it was definitely a risk in my career that I don't know I would have taken without him challenging me to do it. So obviously I took that step. And I would guarantee you, we would not be having this conversation today if I didn't follow his advice and really take that leap of faith. So I kind of have this like acronym I love to use when I talk about careers and my advice to people. And I look at your career as a climb. So if you think of climb, C, courage, really have courage to take that risk. You really never know where it's going to take you, but be willing to take that risk, because had I not, I know I would be sitting as a CFO of Kohls today. Listening. I'm a talker for all of those who know me, and I've really had to focus on being a better listener. But when you listen, you get to hear new ideas, you get to hear new perspectives, and it just really enriches everything you do if you're willing to do that. Be inquisitive, have intellectual curiosity, ask questions. I remember when I first came to Kohls, my patient boss, I would sit in meetings and just come up with lists of questions. Again, I didn't know anything about retailers and I like to shop. And she was patiently answering all these questions, but it built the foundation that I could continue to develop throughout my career at Kohls. And I think you want to be mindful. You want to lead with empathy. You always want to think of others around you. And if you do that, people want to follow you. They want to work with you. They know you are going to always have their best interest at heart. And then last is just believe in yourself. If you don't think you can do it, you won't. And I think that's just really important. So that would be my advice to all of you.
It's really great advice. Thank you. I appreciate that. And climb. I'm going to have that posted on my wall soon. All right, so Bridget, I think I'm going to hand it over to you now to take any of the questions from the Tempo community that might have been submitted. So I will personally say thank you again, Jill. It's been a real honor to have you join Tempo and have this conversation. So Bridget, take it away.
Thank you, Penelope.
Thank you, Penelope. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good, because I'm working from home, so thank you. Jill, fantastic. Thank you so much for spending this hour with us. We're so honored. One of my biggest questions was going to be, what is your mantra? But now I can kind of, if it's okay, we'll just say climb, right?
Absolutely.
It's a great thing to lead. Courage to risk, listening, inquisitive, mindful, and believing in yourself. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Folks out there, send in your questions if you have time to send in those chats. I do have some though already prepared from the audience. There's a couple actually here talking about culture, and you've mentioned a couple times about that failing fast, learning, modifying. Can you speak a little bit about how you as a leader and you are helping your leaders around you to create, I guess what I'm going to ask, like that psychological safety net necessary to fail? Can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I think it starts at the top. And one of the things, you know, I've been at Kohls a long time. And when Michelle came into the organization, not even as CEO, she was just an innovator. And she started talking about failing fast. And we as a culture never actually talked about failure. And I think once you put it out on the table, people will embrace it, but they were afraid to fail. It was like this, well, we never did anything wrong. And by the way, we do tons of things wrong. But if we aren't willing to admit it and learn from it, you're not going to have progress. So we started with the tone at the top was, it was okay. And people could come in and it wasn't just about what went right. We were like, well, what went wrong? What'd you learn from this? And you start asking those questions, but there's no, like, at the end of the day, ramifications from it. People aren't going to hold you accountable. There's not going to be any negative from that. It was a very positive conversation, but it takes time and patience. And you have to continue to do that in every meeting because people have to get comfortable with the fact they're going to admit that some things didn't go right. It's not core to a lot of people, especially I'm sure to a lot of the listeners, that we're used to being successful and you don't want to admit to the failures. So it really started with the tone at the top, and then it just had to be reinforced with every interaction to let them know it was okay. And now we're more innovative than ever. I would say, I don't think we would have taken some of the steps we've done, Amazon, for example, because no one would have been willing to take that risk. And because we're in a very enviable position from a retail perspective.
And so that's really exciting and helpful to know that it's every conversation, starting at the top and then going all the way down. That's very visual for all of us visual learners in here. So thank you for sharing that. What about considerations for, human engagement moving forward in this blended environment? In terms of efficiency, but there must be other things that you're talking about. What are you learning and looking forward for 21 and 22 and 23 to bring forward on that piece from that human and blended environment, being remote and in the office?
Well, I can't wait for people to come in. So, Penelope and I have talked about it. We have this beautiful campus and our culture is so vibrant, and we have this cafeteria area that people would just go to hang out, and it was just always full of energy. And so I definitely miss that. I'm an extroverted person. I get energy out of people. And so it's been hard from that perspective. So I can't wait to welcome people back, but I do think we'll be welcoming them back differently. I think people did enjoy the flexibility of being at home and they can get things done. And so I do think it's not going to be the same number of people in the office, or it could be more from a hoteling perspective. And it's just going to be the flexibility of the fact that we can have people meet, this way and have people in the room, but also getting comfortable with that. So if you're not in the room, how do you feel comfortable with the fact that there could be things that you're missing out on because, human interaction in the virtual world is different. So we're going to have to definitely figure out how we can make people feel super comfortable. This is still okay to have conversations, even though it might not just be one-on-one or everyone on the screen, because people will come back into the office. I mean, we work in a very visual world. If you think about how do you buy product for customers if you never touch it? And that is why there's going to be a need for us to come in at some point and have that, because, you as a consumer want to touch your apparel before you try it on, make sure it's the right fit. And if it's not, you can return it. Well, we don't have the luxury of the returns. We have to make sure we get it right on the front end. So those are places that we're still having to figure out the solves around, because that's not as easy to do from a virtual perspective.
Thank you. As a remote professional, I often feel like making sure that I'm connected to my team and the conversations that happen after the meeting and all of that are, very important. So thank you for being mindful of that. Turning a little bit to your leadership style, you mentioned mentors. Do you still keep in contact with your mentors?
I do, actually. There's two, and I would say I've almost three. I keep in touch with two, but they're men. And I think sometimes people always think as a woman, you have women mentors, but actually mine are two men. And one I worked for 14 years. He was CFO of Kohls, and every time we release something, he sends me a note. So he's very engaged. We have a lot of dialogue. But even during the pandemic, he had never seen anything like it. He'd gone through the 2008 recession, but we can't liken it to the same. And then the other is the one I alluded to. He worked here for 2 years. He went on to be the CFO at 3 other retailers. And it was great because it gave me an outside perspective. One of the things, as you saw, I worked at Kohls a long time, over 20 years. And I never wanted to lose that outside view and just be like, oh, we do it at Kohls this way, because that is the way that you stifle growth and stifle enthusiasm and creativity. So I've always wanted to have outlets of how do I learn what others are doing without having to leave Kohls, because I love it here. I love what we're doing. And so he leaving, being able to provide me that mentorship from the outside was just really awesome, because it helped me develop different ways of thinking versus just the Kohls way of thinking.
That's awesome. Thank you. Do you have any specific challenges that come to mind with being a female CEO or CFO, really male-dominated field and industry? We'd love to hear it.
I mean, you have to get comfortable knowing you're the only woman in the room, especially like when I go out to investor meetings, women are like a unicorn, they're definitely all men. And so you have to get comfortable with that. And I feel like, just being very confident in how you speak to them, not showing that it bothers you, I think is important. But, there are times it's really intimidating, especially when I first started doing this, because these are men who've been doing it for a long time. They all typically know each other because the investor community is quite small. And so you have to make sure that you're showing up with a ton of confidence. And that can be hard. I mean, I would never describe myself as not having confidence, but it's intimidating to come into that room. But you earned your spot to be there. And you just have to continue to remind yourself of that. And then what I've found over time is, this business, what you're doing way better than they do. So they can come across with their academic questions and make you feel a little intimidated. But once you get to know it, you have to believe in yourself. Like, you got there for a reason, you earned it, and don't let them take it away from you.
Which is definitely that B, right? You're bringing in that climb, focusing on the B. I love that. Have you used an executive coach before? As we talked in the prep, Tempo is huge on mentorship, and you have a lot of mentors and mentees with you today. And so sometimes we also think about executive coaching. Have you personally used an executive coach, or what are your thoughts?
I have, actually. So I've had 2 executive coaches. We talked about what got you here doesn't get you there. So as I've moved in my career, we've kind of changed out some coaches to help me continue to elevate. I think it's great. Again, it brings that outside in. It also, I don't feel like you have anything to prove. We use external coaches, and it just is really, they're there for you. So sometimes if you're using a mentor who works with you, you're trying to, prove yourself, and there's no proof. You can be super vulnerable with them. They have only skin in the game to help you. So they give you really honest advice. And, we talk about everything. And I feel like it's really helpful, because it's not just about professional development, but it's also, to the questions earlier, it's like, how do you, with personal, professional, especially this year, it became heightened. It's been great. So I think, making sure you have the right coach is important. So I, interviewed several different coaches. I think the rapport is what makes the success, and you have to have trust. And so I've been incredibly lucky. I've had 2 amazing coaches in my career. I actually still use one as I just finished up my first year. I'm hoping year 2 goes a little easier, but he's been amazing.
Good. I'm glad. So one of the things that we do as leaders all the time is conflict resolution when we're managing teams. Do you have any, one of the big questions coming up right now in the feed is, do you have any tips of conflict resolution? And when things come up that are challenging and you have 2 leaders that have difference of opinions and you're the decision maker, where do you go? Where do you lean in?
Well, first, I think you have to be comfortable with conflict. And that is something I know not everyone likes. You know, we get told we're Midwest nice here or passive aggressive. You have to be comfortable with conflict, and it's hard. And I think you have to know that when you're in that situation, you know, I'm a data person. So you listen for the facts. Use your history to guide what decision you're making. And I think as long as you explain how you got there, it's not about picking one or the other. You know, if I pick one of my daughters saying she's right, then, you know, I love her more, but that's not how it works at work. And so I think you just have to explain why you came to that conclusion so that they understand. And 9 times out of 10, once you show the facts and the reasoning for getting to that conclusion, I think it really brings those teams together, because you're going to probably need those people who are disputing the answer to work together to execute the strategy. So it's really important. And we talked about that earlier. You have to be transparent. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be open. I mean, I push my team all the time. If you think I'm wrong, you need to tell me, because I do not know all the answers. And that's been great. It empowers them. They know we can have open dialogue. There's no repercussions for it. In fact, I actually celebrate it when people are willing to have that dialogue with me, because I think it just makes us all better because of it.
That's wonderful. I had a leader once tell me, you need to have my back. When you don't tell me the things that you find and you're seeing as challenges, and you're not having my back. So bring it up. So I love that you're creating that culture for them to share with you. That's really important. Couple questions that are much related more to the business side of things. Can you speak at all to the cost of bringing in Sephora compared to the anticipated ROI? And what can you share about that piece? I'm sure there's things that you're not able to share, but and how was that determined?
Well, we run everything from a capital expenditure through a lens of return. And so in this case, we know the amount of beauty business we're missing is huge. We hear it from our customers. We know it from market share data. You know, if you talk about what they missed in the purchase at Kohls, it's beauty was the empty thing from the basket. The other thing is we don't have replenishable items. So we are at the grocery store. You don't have to have a new sweater. You don't need a new pair of shoes. So beauty is kind of like the trip driver, because it is replenishable. You do run out of lipstick. You do need a new eyeshadow. So it's helpful from that perspective to drive into traffic. So those things definitely are the win for us. New customer acquisition, we also looked at the fact that we have very limited overlap with their customer base. So it gives us both opportunities to bring new customers and introduce them to Kohls and introduce them to Sephora. We set this up as a partnership. So we are equally splitting in the expenses and the revenue of this venture. So the profit is equally shared. We will report the sales in our financial statements, and we will actually pay for the capital up front from our cash, but then we will share it because it will come through depreciation. So it will be split 50-50 at that point. So those are kind of the high level that we've shared. It'll be available for Sephora, Insider as well. There'll be trained Sephora associates. The experience will be very seamless and very much like a Sephora. And I will say it has a very healthy return. I'm really excited about it. One of the strategies we put forth was to triple our beauty business, and our beauty business is in the low single-digit penetration. So we should see this move much further. I think this Sephora will actually help us surpass that goal, but we always try to take it with a conservative lens. That's my mantra. Love to beat, not on. It's always good to beat, not under perform. So
under promise and over deliver, right?
Absolutely.
Sounds fantastic. We just have like one more minute and then I'll have to wrap it up. And again, so grateful for your time today. Jill, you've got a huge job, a wonderful opportunity. Tell us how you decompress. What do you like to do when you're not working?
So it's interesting. Obviously, this year was a little more stressful. So for me, I work out. So I started actually running with my daughter, and running has never been a thing, but my daughter wanted to run. And I'm like, well, it's a bonding experience. So, but I found I loved it. I started enjoying it because it was just like, it cleared your mind. It got rid of energy. And quite honestly, with this virtual environment, I found myself not moving. Like you just sit all day. The amount of steps you took was so limited. So I found that really that was a good release for me. So I'm also a fair weather runner. So then winter happens. I'm not running. And so I started doing different workouts, and it's just really been my release. The other thing is I've been lucky enough is my freshman daughter plays basketball, and she was lucky enough to make her varsity basketball team. They've been playing with masks, but I love watching sports, as I alluded to, and watching your daughter play sports. It's just really amazing. So I do make sure I get out to see all the games that we're allowed into, or we stream them. So that's another outlet for me. And then I did see a couple of the Packer notes. I'm definitely a Packers fan. So having NFL work was good too, just to sit and really not have to think about work or see anything of the economy, etc. It's kind of a nice outlet. So that's really where I find my free time.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing with us. I think that wraps up our time, Kelsey and Jen, if you guys wanted to pop back out. But again, I just wanted to thank everybody and thank Jill so much for being with us. And thank you to all of our Temple members and our guests and our emerging women leaders for attending with us today. It's like over 145 guests today. Jen, that's so fantastic and fun. Upcoming events right there on your screen. So we're so excited again, as Jen mentioned at the top of the hour, to have our Tempo Talks the first or second Friday of the month starting in February. So that's the next Tempo Talks coming up, and I'm very excited about that. Make sure you register. Influencer skills for the new way of doing business. And then as Jen, I think, mentioned in the beginning, we're going back to our regular cadence of the third Thursday of the month, the programming. And I actually think that's the 4th. February 28th, and that's going to be an awesome conversation with Ellen and Katie from the Milwaukee Public Museum. So the evolution of the Milwaukee Public Museum. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to BMO and to Mary Beth for the sponsorship of this wonderful program. And with that, I think everyone should have a wonderful day. Jill, we hope we get to see you again soon.
It was great. Thank you so much for having me.
You were fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everyone.